Welcome to episode 6 of Ask a Human, Answer to Unanswered Questions. I'm Trish McAllister, the State Bar's Law Practice Management Attorney. In each episode, we answer AI questions submitted by Texas lawyers in plain English with practical tips you can use today and clear guide rails so you can stay ethical and effective. Today's episode focuses on AI and confidentiality. And we are so lucky to have Alex Shahrestani here to answer some of the questions that folks submitted that are specific to privacy, confidentiality, and security questions. Alex is an attorney and software developer and the founding partner of Promise Legal. He and Patrick Wright have been our faithful presenters and panelists for the Ask a Human live webinars that most of you have already seen. Thanks so much for joining us, Alex. We're really grateful that you're able to continue to help so many people by answering their questions.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Trish.
So we'll just get right to it. What does confidentiality look like when I'm using traditional legal software?
So there's a lot of misunderstandings out there that have been in existence since basically the .com era. So I think it's important to sort of understand what software actually is on the back end in order for you to understand how confidentiality actually works in your day-to-day practice. So I'm not going to go into technical details or anything, just by way of analogy, sort of explain what software is. And a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around this, but basically software is a fancy spreadsheet. In a lot of cases, it's basically a set of data, just like you have with a spreadsheet. It's just presented to you in a particular way. And whereas in a spreadsheet, you might have various formulas and calculations on numbers, with an app, it's probably going to be more like a bunch of ways to put different sentences and types of presentation styles together in a way that looks good to you as the user. But on the back end, as far as the software developer is concerned, it's basically a spreadsheet. And so all of that data that you use with their software is available more or less in spreadsheet format. So rather than a spreadsheet, they're using something called a database, but it's largely the same. Broad strokes, it's the same thing. In order for them to provide you with any level of technical support, so say you're drafting something on Microsoft Office Cloud and it crashes and you need to do a recovery, the reason the recovery is possible is because someone on the other side of the software, someone who's developing and maintaining the software, is technically able to see the data that you have. Now, that doesn't mean that using technology is automatically a breach of confidentiality, but I would hazard a guess that in a vacuum, the state of the rules of ethics would indicate that it is a breach of confidentiality. But the way that the practice has gone for the past 30 years at this point, I think as a practical matter, it is not a breach of confidentiality. Where does your protection come from? That is largely from the privacy policy in terms of use of the tool that you're using. So it's a contractual obligation of confidentiality more so than it is some technical measure that protects your data. Sometimes there are technical measures in place, but there's almost always going to be some person somewhere who can like sit down and look at your data if they want to. Just the reality is they mostly don't care and they're using it to actually provide you with the service. It's important to look at the privacy policy and understand what they promise they're going to do. In a lot of ways, they restrict themselves to using the data in order to provide you with the services and to improve the services. And that's more or less okay. If you're using a legal tech tool, it's pretty much going to be in the same sort of vein. But there is going to be some level of viewing of your data. And that's just something that we have to be comfortable with. What you need to avoid is when they say they're going to use the data that you input into the software for marketing purposes, for developing any sort of profile of advertising on you and your clients. Things like that are going to be the red flags you want to watch out for. But in general, confidentiality when you're using a piece of software is not that nobody is ever able to see the information. It's that they promise to only look at the information for the purpose of providing you with the software.
That makes sense. I mean, I think that's logical. I mean, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it does make sense. And I like your analogy of thinking of software as just a big spreadsheet. I love spreadsheet. Another question that's kind of a corollary to this is, how does confidentiality work in AI services compared to traditional legal software?
It's actually a little different with AI. In a lot of ways, it's the same. So broad strokes, it's the same. There's one additional risk factor that everybody has on their mind, and that's if you're using your data and it's being trained into the model, that is an additional way in which you might accidentally break confidentiality and privilege. I would argue that it's not necessarily so, but I wouldn't allow an AI company to train on my data just because out of an abundance of caution. But ironically, what a lot of people don't recognize is that there's an additional layer of protection of your confidentiality and privilege with AI tools in particular. And the reason for that is it's still sort of the spreadsheet model, right? That mental model still applies here. But whereas in traditional software, there's numbers for calculations and maybe some kinds of word data present in order to provide you with the software service. With an AI models don't actually understand words. They understand numbers. And so every word you type into AI is actually transformed into a series of numbers on which operations are then done. So when you're looking at that spreadsheet, without additional work being done, the data that shows what you've said and what's being said back is, in a lot of cases, a gibberish set of numbers that no person could ever interpret without several additional steps, where technical hurdles are actually useful. So with regular software, the technical hurdles in place may or may not be robust, but with the AI, because it requires certain sort of computations to be done before you can see things in plain text, it's easier for the company to actually keep their promise to prevent people who aren't supposed to see the data from seeing the data. So there's actually a case to be made that AI services are more protective of your confidentiality than traditional software services, which is somewhat ironic. The training on your data isn't necessarily a breach of confidentiality or privilege. That's because the way that information is represented in the AI model is essentially, the model is like a graph, like a 3D graph, but instead of 3 dimensions, it's like 1,000 dimensions. So it's not a real thing. It's abstract. You can't really picture it, but every set of words has a place in that graph. And then it creates patterns between the various sets of words based on how often they show up in the data. So it's still just a mathematical thing. You can't look inside of a model on its own, like assume everything is equal. You can't look inside of a model and see actual information. All you can see is that a piece of data in the graph has moved a little bit in one direction or another.
Are legal AI services more confidentiality friendly than general AI services?
If you believe the marketing, yes, but I do not. I do not believe the marketing. So there's a number of reasons for it. First and foremost, most service providers who are serving AI services to lawyers are actually using ChatGPT, using Claude, using Gemini underneath the hood. So they've done some stuff to make it feel more convenient to you as a lawyer, but you're still talking to those same 3 providers. So the confidentiality guarantees of those providers is largely what's protecting you anyway. And in fact, you've introduced a new party into the equation who can potentially see your data, right? So in some ways, it's actually less confidentiality friendly because you're expanding the circle of folks who can potentially look at your client's information. Now, legal service AI companies, know that there's confidentiality concerns for lawyers. And so they really hammer on how they're exceptional at protecting your confidentiality. And so I think in a lot of cases, they're actually trying really hard to be protective of your data, but they're not going to be more protective of your data in particular than the service providers they're using, right? Like it's a technical limitation. There are some providers out there who are starting to talk about making their own models. There's nothing about using an AI model that can be more or less confidential. The only thing they can do is turn off all sorts of technical support for you, which is unlikely what anybody wants or needs or requires. Right. If they turned off all kinds of data that they're able to see, they wouldn't be able to make the product better for you. They wouldn't be able to help you fix things when they go wrong. And it's slightly unreasonable to expect of them to not ever look at your data. Yeah, I would suggest that the confidentiality of using a legal specific LLM is probably at best on par with what you can get from those major general commercial providers.
That's good to know, because I suspect, I don't know because I haven't priced them, but I suspect the general providers are a lot cheaper.
Oh, yeah. The lawyer tax is strong with the AI legal tech community.
I would imagine so. What are some things I can do to improve confidentiality protection when I use AI?
So there's two things in particular to pay attention to. The first of which is your client's use of AI, which is, kind of tangential to this question, but important to note.
It is.
Because those AI companies are able to log your data and they have these protections about how they're going to use it, but nonetheless they log it. Discovery requests can reach that data. And so if a client is using AI to interact with your legal work product, yeah, there could be some privilege attached in which you can withhold some of that data. But there's always the chance that some of it will find its way through, or something that's not quite on the nose protected by privilege might indicate some of the underlying work product or sort of the thought pattern you might be having as the representative of your client. So I think it's important for clients not to use AI with actual work product and with actual legal questions once they've engaged you. They're much better off asking you to make those queries for them, because you're going to have much more protection than their accounts are, right? Like, it's all sort of under the umbrella of your practice. In the same way you might have practice management software not subject to discovery, I would hazard a guess that a judge would be reluctant to open your AI logs in discovery on behalf of a client's claim or counterclaim. In terms of how you use AI as the attorney, it's important to be using major providers. So the protection is largely contract based, not actually technically focused. So it's going to be a question of trust and capability. So a company that's brand new and makes all the promises in the world is great if you believe they can actually back it up. And so that's where you kind of fall into these traps of like, well, I don't particularly like the privacy practices of one particular entity, but I do trust that they're able to do what they say they are going to do. And so that's something that you have to factor in when you're picking an AI provider. The other pieces are about your actual usage. So with like an OpenAI or a Gemini or a Claude, as long as you have the training turned off and you're paying attention to your privacy policy in terms of use, I am comfortable personally putting client information into the AI. But if you're not comfortable with that, or perhaps a client is requesting that you don't do things like that, you can omit client data. So you just don't put in the client specifics. You just put in placeholder stuff. And there are things you can do to make that a little bit easier. So I've played around with this a little bit. There are some cases where I don't want client data leaking into the product for particular reasons, not because of confidentiality reasons, as we've discussed so far, but for like technical reasons I won't go into. And one of the ways that I manage that is I basically have a local AI, which is an AI that doesn't run on the internet. And I have it go in and find all examples of personally identifiable information. And then I'm able to do a quick search and replace of all of those instances. And so then I have the document that's ready to go into the major provider's AI, and I don't have to worry about those leaks happening. So really, it's going to come down to choosing the right provider, having a conversation with your client, and then, if you are uncomfortable with sharing, making sure just when you add stuff into the file, you omit the personal identifiers.
Well, that makes sense. And it's really good that you can use a tool to do that for you rather than, redacting everything, because that would be a nightmare.
It really does speed things up so much.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have not personally done that, but I'm going to. And just to practice, I want to know how to do it. What is a local LLM, and how is it protective of confidential or privileged information?
Like I said, a local LLM is an LLM that doesn't operate on the internet. So it can operate on the internet, but more or less, it's not going to anybody else. It's something that's fully within your control. So any of the logs, any of that information is only going to land with you. So if you're using a local LLM and it's running on your laptop or whatever, when you ask it a question, it doesn't go to the internet. It doesn't hit some server somewhere. It's running entirely on your machine to generate its answers. So you can be certain that the data is not leaving your locus of control. There are ways in which you can actually do this on the cloud, and I don't want to go into the complexities of it, but basically when you do that, you're renting a physical computer somewhere that someone else is taking care of. Someone is providing physical security. Someone is making sure that it's always running and doesn't go down without warning. It's actually in a lot of ways better than actually running it on your own computer. But the same things still apply. The provider isn't able to access your data. Other folks are not able to access your data. And the same principles apply where the AI is running just in that machine that you control and isn't going anywhere else. There are lots of those, and they are getting pretty good. So it used to be the case that these local LLMs were just miles behind your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, your Geminis. But now it's kind of at this point where it's like a 6-month lag almost, right? So instead of it being totally unusable for legal work, you can actually use these local models and get some pretty good work done. And you're able to run them on, like I said, on your laptop, on your desktop, on the cloud. There are some that you can even run on your phone. So it's a totally accessible tool, and it's now at a point where the quality of the work is comparable to the quality of those major model providers.
What are some, I mean, this isn't one of the questions, but I'm just going to ask you directly. What are some of the local LLMs that you've tried? I mean, do you have a favorite? I mean, this is just to let everybody know, this is not a state bar of Texas endorsement, but I'm just wondering, I'm just curious about the ones you've tried and how they've gotten, the ones that you've used have gotten better over time.
There are a number of ways you can use local LLMs. I have tried installing them on my own devices. I have tried using the cloud versions. And I really like to dip in and dip out of the various models and just see where they're at and how they compare in performance. For the most part, I use Claude for everything. And so it's more academic than anything else. But there are two places that I always point people to when talking about local LLMs. The first is a website called Hugging Face. There's this thing in software development called version control. And so when you're working on a document and you're collaborating with other people, you're able to go in and make changes, and other people can see those changes, and you can sort of go back and see the history of changes. That's what version control is. And so software developers have this huge database called GitHub of where they host their software and make these changes. Hugging Face is like that for AI in particular. So there's a bunch of software that uses AI. There are AI models. There are AI research papers. It's the same thing, just specifically for AI. But what Hugging Face provides is test usage of all of these models that people are creating. So there's like thousands, tens of thousands of different AI models you can play around with that are running on those private cloud servers that you're able to interact with and see how they operate. And that can include not just like text chatting, but like image generation or video generation. You can do text to speech or speech to text, like all of the things. So Hugging Face is a great place to think of as like a playground to see how AI works. That is one of the places I recommend everyone check out. The other one is that Google has released an app that's available on both Android and on iOS. Let me see if I can find the actual name of it. I think it's like Google Frontier or Google Galaxy. Let me see if I have it on my phone quickly. No, I don't see it. But if you look it up, if you look up Google AI app, you'll find it. But basically what it does is it gives you access to all of Google's models that they allow you to download. And the latest one that came out is called Gemma 4, GEMMA 4. And they have several versions of it. One that can run on a phone, one that can run on a laptop, one that runs on, intense hardware kind of thing. And it's easy to use. And so you just install the app, you click on Gemma 4 as the app you want to use. It downloads to your phone and the AI just works from your phone without touching anything else. So it's a very user-friendly approach to local LLMs.
That's awesome. That's great. I haven't tried Game of Four, so, and I have to say, whoever came up with the name of Hugging Face, like, I'm in love with them right now.
Yeah, it is great. Yeah,
it's
definitely.
a great name. Anyway, okay, so our final question for the day. And then we'll let you go. Is if I want to look at using local LLMs, which you kind of already started talking about, where can you start? So you've already answered some of that, but is there anything else that you wanted to just share on that?
One of the providers that I actually use is called Ollama. So Ollama. And I know the names. Who knows what the names are?
I want to meet these people.
Yeah. You know who's bad at names is ChatGPT. All of their stuff is named so poorly. Like they have this thing called custom GPTs, and you're like, what the heck is that? It's a terrible name. Anyway, Ollama is one of those cloud providers where you can run a local LLM. And they provide you with a number of models you're able to use. And so you pay a monthly fee, you use their interface to chat with the bot, but it's still your private account. And so part of their privacy policy as of, a couple of days ago is that they don't store any of your data. The data that they do store is, temporary. It's just to give you the answer you looked for, and then it's purged from their records. So even if they wanted to go and look at what you had, they actually couldn't. So there's some downsides to that, like I discussed. But if you want that control and you want to be able to try some of those bigger name models, you're able to do that by using Ollama and just picking from their menu of AIs that you can use. Also, they have a desktop app where you're able to download models that fit onto your computer and run them locally, and that's free. You only pay for the cloud service. So that's another way to get started with local LLMs. And then finally, that Gemma model using the Google app is a good way to get started as well.
Anything you can do from your phone. I mean, I'm like, I'm terrible. I'm attached to my phone. So anything I can do with my phone, that's going to be the first one I start probably.
Yeah,
But
and it's great if you're mobile and you're like, I need to write this email and it's coming across really poorly. How can I fix it?
yeah,
You can ask your AI, you can paste in the email. You don't have to
yeah.
worry about it going to Google or anyone else. It's great.
Yeah, it is pretty great. And that might be very helpful for like an attorney who's kind of frustrated with a client or,
Yes. Yeah, that was
or you
one.
hit send.
Yeah, one of my first ever uses of AI was, okay, when I'm sending an email to a client, I run it through there first to make sure it's coming across the way I think it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's very smart. Saving relationships is always a good idea.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. I mean, you have just been such a godsend to, everyone who has watched the webinars and who's going to be watching this video. So thank you for joining us and talking to
My
us again
pleasure.
about confidentiality. I'm sure I'll be probably asking you in the future to do more of these.
Yeah,
So,
happy to do it.
so I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who is watching the video and joined us for the two webinars that Patrick and Alex have done back in November and then again in April of 2026. And if you have any questions that you want to ask for our next webinar, or, just feel free to email me and I can try to get the answers to you quicker. But my email address is trish.mcallister@texasbar.com. And I'm sure we will have a little thing up on the screen so you can see it. Anyway, okay. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
See you next time.